Rav, I was having a discussion with someone in the yeshiva about, they were telling me that, he was telling me that he prefers to daven alone because he's able to organize his thoughts and have a lot more kavana than davening in a minyan. And my response to him was that Hashem wants us to daven in minyanim. He doesn't want us davening alone, specifically Shachris, Mincha, and Mariv. So you could always do Spodidus. I was just going to ask the Rabbi, why is that? Is it more important? This was the question came on, like, is it more important to have kavana? Which is more important, having kavana, being alone, or being with the minyan without kavana?
Okay, let's try to start at the beginning. It is definitely important to daven with the minyan, and it's definitely important to have kavana when you daven. They're both important. And I don't think you could give a general rule as to which is more important. I think it would depend upon the individual case, how bad it is and what kind of problems there are with the kavana and so forth and so on. That's number one. Number two, I hope this question would only be a temporary question. It would be a developmental question, because eventually you want to work for a situation where you do daven with the minyan and you can maximize your kavana, or at least if there's a trade-off, the trade-off is only a minor trade-off, and it'd be worth having both. When you live in a big city, the variety of minyanim is very great. Some are slower and some are faster, and different nuschos. So I don't think that if you look around, you should really be stuck and feel that you can't. But I can imagine a person who, at the beginning, finds it difficult to be together with the minyan and to have kavana. Now, one solution, and many people aren't aware of this, the only thing that has to be together with the minyan is starting the Shemona Esrei. Just start that one moment. All the rest can be independent. I know when I started, my davening was very slow. I started before the minyan. I davened at my speed, and I timed myself to get the beginning of the Shemona Esrei when they did. It took me much longer to say the Shemona Esrei than it took them. I wasn't together with them in the ending of the Tfillah. None of that matters. The mitzvah of davening together with the minyan is only for that one moment when you start the Shemona Esrei. After that, you can be completely disconnected. So that, if the person is capable of focusing on what he's doing and not distracted by what the other people are doing, if his problem is racing to keep up, that I can understand would be very distracting and very disturbing, very difficult to be thinking about how long I have to say this and when he's going to break in and so forth, and then also to have kavana. But if it's only timing that one moment, it shouldn't be that difficult. And that way he could have both right away. If not, then I think that it's a good question to ask on a personal, individual level, because I don't think the answer is going to be the same for everyone. In particular, when you are developing the way in which you solve conflicts, the way in which you solve, shall I take this step or that step, is very often not based on the law, not based on which is the more important step, or the one that the law would give higher precedence to. It's the one that will be the right next step for you in your personal development. Even if legally it's less important, it might be the right thing to do. I can imagine a person who, if he's told you got to daven with a minyan, and he struggles, and he can't focus, he'll just give it up altogether. If that's what davening has to be for me, it's just a waste of time. I'm not doing anything, I'm not accomplishing anything. Give it up altogether. That would be a terrible outcome. So I think that those kinds of personal factors have to be taken into account. You can't answer these questions just by looking into the Shulchan Aruch.
What about the idea of being amongst the Shechina, because of being in a minyan brings the Shechina as compared to davening alone? Because a lot of people, even including myself, I feel a lot more concentrated when I'm davening alone, like in a secluded place. Let's say go outside, daven by myself. But like when you're davening with a minyan, there's a Shechina, but like sometimes it's hard to not everyone feels the Shekhinah. It's not always. I don't understand. Like, is the Shekhinah something people feel? Like, I don't.
Okay, so the points you're making are good, and you're making them in a good way. Yes, the Shekhinah is there when you're davening with a minyan, and it's there in a way that isn't there at any other time. No, often you don't feel it. I don't know if anybody could claim that he knows he feels it unless he said Ruach HaKodesh or whatever. But often you do things not because you feel them, you do them because you know they're there and they're right. So, and I think that's a person of principle will do that, and his satisfaction comes from the fact that he did what the Shulchan Aruch told him to do. Not that he had a kind of thrill or a kind of inspiration, while he was there. So, I don't think the right way to go about it. Even if you could weigh them up halachically as to which is more important, that wouldn't be the right answer for someone who's in a position of development. For him, it's got to be what's the best investment for his next step in development. That's the right way to answer the question. That's going to vary from person to person. That's why I say I don't think there could be any general. But I do think you hinted at this, and I think you're absolutely right. And you go to daven with a minyan, there will be compromises, no question. It won't always be the same speed or the same loudness or whatever, same emphasis that you would have. But the very fact that you are sacrificing something to be part of the minyan means you appreciate the importance of the minyan. The minyan is something that's worth sacrificing for, because, as you say, the Shekhinah is present in a way that it isn't present otherwise, and that's much more valuable. And your Tfillah is heard in another way. It's heard in a much different way. So the very fact that there's a sacrifice, I think, can be understood as a positive thing. You know, I grew up Reform, and the attitude was make things easy so people don't have to make sacrifices. They had Sabbath services twice a week, on Saturday and on Sunday. Because if you had a golf meet on Saturday, you can't miss that. So, when I became attracted to Orthodoxy, the point was made to me that if your attitude towards X is that X should be made easy, then the message you're sending is X is not worth sacrificing for. And if it's not worth sacrificing for, it can't be of much value. And then why would you want to get involved? And I think that's 100% correct. Indeed, sometimes you want to ask for a sacrifice just to reinforce the fact that this is a very valuable thing. And you should be prepared to sacrifice for it. So I don't think there's a single answer to the question, but it's a good question for someone to ask. Someone who's on his way in and finds this difficulty, he should go to a Rabbi and say, look, I have this dilemma. What should I do now at this point in my development? What's the best thing for me to do? And different people get different answers.
We're discussing in class today. The Rav said, like in the bracha, to build Yerushalayim, that it's referring to Yerushalayim Shalmala, or not necessarily the physical Yerushalayim, or but then I asked that, like Hashem isn't completely in Yerushalayim, because that's what's Galus. The Shekhinah is in Galus. We're talking about we're not in the Gula, so there is a certain level of separation between us and the Shekhinah or Hashem, or like not separation but like distance. I don't know how to describe it, but I asked the Rav in the class: is there a difference between the Shekhinah and Hashem himself? Like, what does it mean, the Shekhinah? Like,
okay, I'll try to say something about that, but where you're starting from is not coherent. The way you presented it, it's not coherent. The Shekhinah literally means presence. Well, I'll talk about what presence means in a moment. And we do, in the language, we talk about Kaddish Shechintei, the Holy One, blessed be He, although that's the translation is not 100% right either, and His presence. We speak of them as separate. One is masculine, one is feminine. We talk about the relationship between them. The Nistar, the Kabbalah talks about that a great deal. So they definitely are thought of as different for a certain purpose. But when you talk about localizing, I think you have at most half the picture, and even that may not be quite right. We have one statement, Chazal, Lo zaza shchina mikos lo maravi. Right? On the other hand, the pasuk says, Imo anochi v'tzara, that the shchina goes into Golos with us. So, where is it? If we're in Golos in Johannesburg, or in Los Angeles, or in London, can the shchina be both at the Western Wall and also with the Jews all over the world? And the answer, of course, is yes, because there are different aspects of shchina. The holiness of the temple has not lapsed. The second sanctification of the land of Israel is permanent, remains. But on the other hand, Imo Anochi V'Tzarach, the Baruch Hu says, I'm present with you wherever you are in pain. I'm present with you and I share that pain. So I wouldn't say there's a distance between us and the Shekhinah. That I would not say.
The Galus, but isn't that Galus?
But it says the Shekhinah goes into Galus with the Jewish people.
So
The
what is
Shekhinah
Galus?
goes
It's
in.
exile of just.
It means you're not where you're not in Eretz Israel, where the land has holiness. You're not in the place where Kodesh Baruch Hu has a different. Now that's what I want to talk about. Shekhinah's presence. Presence means showing something that otherwise is hidden. If you associate the Kodesh Baruch Hu with space, which you have to do delicately, because since the Kodesh Baruch Hu is not a physical object, he can't be in a space. Only physical objects can be in a space. But it can be related, and the way he's related, this is Rashi Prakim now. The way he's related is because his will gives existence to everything that exists. That's everything. The clods of dirt on the Temple Mount, and the sand in Saudi Arabia, and the ice in Antarctica, and all of it. All of it depends equally on his ratzon to keep it in existence. Now, usually that ratzon doesn't show. We, in looking at the world, have this illusion that it just carries itself. It's there today because it was there yesterday and nothing destroyed it. So it's not manifest that his will is what's behind it. Shekhinah is either a manifestation that his will is behind it, or it's a special application of his will in certain ways for certain purposes that you don't have elsewhere in the world. And that's why it's called his presence, in the sense that you can see a difference. You can see a difference. We're coming up to Purim. The holiday of Purim is celebrating a miracle that took place outside the land of Israel. And it was a miracle. If you look at the events that took place in Megillas Esther, you could see that they're orchestrated. They're not happening by accident. They're not happening by chance. So that's an aspect of Shekhinah that was present, that was there for them and operated for them. In the temple, you had 10 daily, everyday miracles going on all the time. Visible miracles. You just walk in and you could see them. That's an expression of Shekhinah in the temple. There you could see it. And in the temple there were certain things that were there which gave you ability to feel it, which you don't have elsewhere. It's one of the things we're missing when we don't have the temple. But to say that there's a distance, no. Kodesh Baruch Hu is together with the Jewish people wherever they are.
But like even at the Kosher Maravi, we say Musaf that we Nechatenu Galina Martzenu. So we still galus even in this land. It's a spiritual galus. What was it like a?
Oh no, those words can't refer to a spiritual galus. It says Golinu May Artzenu. If you are standing, yes, that's true. Except, who's we? Who's we who are exiled from our land? Does it mean me? Well, we is plural. Does it mean me and my family? Why am I limiting that? How about saying that the Jewish people is in Golos? I'm speaking for the Jewish people. All the prayers are in plural. They're meant to be expressions for the Jewish people as a whole. Majority of Jews don't live here. So I think that's the sentiment you have to have. It is possible to have Gullus in the land of Israel, so to speak, poetically, but that's not what's being talked about there, because this is Me'ar Tzenu. Gullus in the land of Israel is one way of characterizing the period of the Maccabees. There, the Greeks took over the educational systems, the social functions of Eretz Israel, and they were practicing Greek philosophy and Greek religion in the land of Israel. There you could say that Gullus came into the land of Israel and captured us. Though that's poetry, it's only poetry, but it's not meaningless poetry.
Or to now, even with the secular government.
That's right. To a certain extent, it's not as aggressive as it was. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've been told by people who lived through it or whose parents lived through it 100 years ago. What it said about the Egyptians in Egypt, ain't biased, ain't shames. There's no house without someone dead in it, because all the firstborn got killed. The Yishuv here, from the beginning of the 20th century, for 40 years, you had, because Zionism was so seductive, so persuasive, that every family had lost children to Zionism. So it is an aspect of Gullus. I mean, Zionism is the expression of a certain European nationalistic ideal. Herzl said so in Goyish terms in the Jewish state. So I think that's right. The Goyish values. Actually, there's a lot of evidence to this. A lot to be said about this. Every couple of years, you have in this country international sports competition. What's it called? Yeah, Maccabi. Yeah, the Maccabean Games. Yeah, right. Let's see, Maccabee. I seem to remember them. Weren't the Maccabees the ones who chased the Greeks out of Israel? Now let's see, international athletic competition. Where does it go back to? Who invented that? Wasn't it the Greeks? Yeah. So here you take the name of the people who pushed the Greeks and Greek culture out of the land of Israel, and you use that name for today's expression of Greek culture in Israel. Isn't that clever? It's very clever. They're, as propagandists, the early Zionists knew very well what they were doing. There was a movement called Bilu. Bilu stands for Beis Yaakov L'chuvan Elcha. Right? L'chuvan Elcha meaning leave the rest of the world and come to Israel. The last two words I left out are Be'or Hashem. But that I left out. So you have that kind of thing all the time. Yes, there's a great deal of Gullus here in the land of Israel. One more remark on these wow women, the women of the wall, protest. They want equal rights at the wall and everything else. I think they're making a historical, cultural, and religious mistake. Behind that wall, there were animal sacrifices. Do they believe in that? Are they proud of that? To look back to that, our heritage, and say, yes, look how wonderful Judaism is because of animal sacrifices? Probably not. So why is this the place that you are choosing to assert your religious identity? You believe in democracy. Go make your protest in front of the Knesset, to have a chamber of the Knesset set aside for your feminist services. That's where you belong. You don't belong here. The whole thing is totally phony. It's totally phony. It's just political. Rabbi Soloveitchik, from whom I heard many, many shurim, had an incident. Now, I've heard the story probably third hand, so I don't know if I get all the details right, but the story goes like this. A woman came to him and said, Rabbi, I want to pray with a talis. I see men, when they wear the talis, I see what it does for them, how it's going to focus their prayer and everything else, and I think as a woman, I should be able to wear a talis also. So he said, look, let's not jump into it too fast. Let's try it stage by stage. Buy the garment, the rectangular cloth garment, and wear it. Don't put the strings in. Just wear the garment and wear it, and try it out and see what happens. See whether it has the effect that you want. So she did for 3 months. He came back and he said, "No, how did it go?" She said, "Yeah, it definitely helped me. It elevated me, inspired me, and it gave me more focus and more attention." He said, "Oh, so it's working?" She said, "Yeah, it's working." He said, "Fine, keep it like that, without the strings. You don't need the strings." Now, the rectangular piece of cloth is not a mitzvah at all. She didn't want the mitzvah. She didn't care about the mitzvah. Nothing to do with it. It was the men's garment, and she as a woman doesn't want to be deprived by not having the men's garment. And and what was revealed was the fact that there was no genuine religious motivation there at all. The point of the garment is that it has tzitzis on it, and you're doing a mitzvah deraisa when you wear it. And with that, you are dignifying the prayer that you're going to say. Not that you're wearing a piece of cloth, not that it functions as a psychological focuser. No, that's not his point. So this is all where the external values and external mentality have seeped into us. And I think it was one of the Tursky brothers in America, the famous rabbinical Tursky brothers, who said, if you think you can build a wall and keep out all non-Jewish external influences, you're in the midst of a very dangerous mistake. Because if you think you can do that, you won't bother to perceive the influences that are coming in and to take measures to combat them. There's no such thing as a perfect wall. Influences will creep across the wall no matter what. And try to be conscious of them, observe them, and then take measures to counteract it. So I think this sense of creeping gullus, I think, is really true. Of course, those who live among Goyim, they're very much subject to this. But even we who live in the land of Israel, it is all around us. It's very hard to escape.
So it's not even a vera for a woman to wear a four-corner garment without tzitzis?
Right.
Okay. So it's only for men.
Because she's not mechuyev to put it on. She has a kiyuma mitzvah. If she wears it with tzitzis, she can make a blessing on it. According to Ashkenazim, she can make a blessing on it. Mm-hmm. But she has no chiyuv to do it.
Right.
And the prohibition against wearing it without tzitzis is because when you put it on, you are then obligated to put the strings on, and you're not putting the strings on. Uh-huh. It's what's called in our language an isra say. It's a prohibition that comes because there's a positive commandment to do something, and you're not doing it. Uh-huh. And the nafka mina is, if we're going down this road, what happens if you're wearing tzitzis on Shabbos and the tzitzis get destroyed? They become invalidated. So at Shabbos, you don't have to take off the garment. Because the only prohibition against wearing the garment without tzitzis is the positive commandment to make the tzitzis. But on Shabbos, you can't make the tzitzis. You can't tie knots on Shabbos. So therefore, the Isra say doesn't apply, and you can keep it.
And also at night?
So at night, the problem with the nighttime is a machlokes. Okay. It says uri samoso, you should see it. And there are two ways legally that's interpreted. One is it should either be daytime when you do the mitzvah and not nighttime. At nighttime, it's not applicable. Or the garment should be a daytime garment and not a nighttime garment, irrespective of what's going on in the sky when the action takes place. So it's a machlokes, and that being the case, you can't choose one side. So even if it's nighttime, she wouldn't be able to do it because maybe the prohibition. The only thing that you could do, according to that, is if you wear a nighttime garment at night, then it's definitely not required. It doesn't require tzitzis. Mm-hmm. But then a man could do it too. It had nothing to do with being a woman.
Yeah. Question. So I was just thinking of the hashkafic. So I was a mashgiach in Cape Town in South Africa. So I supervised the products and made sure there was no treif coming into the butchery. And in Cape Town, there's no Jewish butchery. There's a supermarket, and in that supermarket they have a kosher butchery where there's mashgiach and people supervising, and they also have a treif butchery for the non-Jews. And but it's owned by non-Jews, and so the non-Jewish worker from the treif side, they were running low on meat, And so they came to the kosher side and was like, we're going to take some of your meat to the treif side because we're running low, which isn't a problem. Can't work the other way around. We obviously can't take in treif meat, but they could give the non-Jews kosher meat. It's no problem. So they came and took our meat, and they were wrapping it up, and they took like the kosher price off, and it went like half the price down because it was now going to be sold. It's kosher meat, but it's going to be advertised as non-kosher, and it's going to be half the price cheaper because there's such a difference between kosher meat and non-kosher meat in Cape Town. It's a lot more, much more of a price.
Yeah. So what's the
so
problem?
my question was, so I was the supervisor, and I watched them taking this meat, and they took the hechsher off, but I knew that meat was kosher.
Yeah.
So like, I could save a lot of money. I could save a lot of money, and also this Jewish woman was also, she was like, that meat's kosher, but I could save a lot of money and buy that meat, but it doesn't have a hechsher on it because I know it's kosher. So I was in the butchery.
Yeah.
But like then I told this dilemma that like people are gonna think I'm buying treif meat. You know, I'm the mashgiach, and I saw that meat, so I was completely like.
Okay, let me repeat the question because it's a nice, interesting question. I think I do know the answer. They often don't know answers to practical questions. You have a facility that sells kosher meat and treif meat, and the kosher meat is under supervision, and everything's fine. And the treif side goes short on meat, and they want to take. There's one ownership. Economically, it's one place, and they want to take some of the kosher meat and use it. They don't want to be out of meat on the treif side. They're going to take it, and let's say it's going to be sold raw. The whole thing's all raw.
Yeah, that's raw.
So, so they're going to take it. They'll take off the hechsher because the people who are buying non-Jewish meat or non-kosher meat don't want to know that it's kosher. And of course, they're going to charge half price because that's the difference in the kosher and treif meat. But they want to do it. That's what the store owner wants to do. Now, you know that meat is kosher. Even though it's sold on the other side, there's no hechsher on it, but you know it's kosher. Can you buy it at half price? Now, first of all, can you buy it per se, and then it's supposed somebody sees you and all the rest of that.
I was worried about Mars Iron.
So, okay, so if you're only worried about Mars Iron, then I think you're on the right track. Of course you can buy it. The owner wants to sell it at that price. If you say to them, listen, hold the music. I'll pay you the price that you want for over there. I'll pay it for you all here. Just ship it to my house, and I'll take 16 kilo, right? That'll be fine. All he wants is the money in change for the meat. So you're giving him the money. Doesn't make any difference who gives him the money, right? That's perfectly all right. And then it seems to me if you're working behind the scenes, you have to go up in front and buy it like everybody else and take a bill. Go to the cash register and so on and so on. Just take the meat and say, I took 25 pounds of this meat and pay for it the new price. All he wants is money for the meat. He doesn't care where the money comes from.
No, I had to pay at the register at the till. So I asked him, can I not just put the hechsher on so that people will not think I'm buying treif meat? He's like, no, because that hechsher is what makes it so expensive. The hechsher on there adds the price to the meat, and so the reason why they're selling at such a low price is because they don't have that hechsher, and people just assume it's treif meat.
Yeah. Okay.
So the hashkafa, the point of view is, what about like Jews just judging you favorably? Like,
now, why don't you wait till the last 5 minutes before the store is emptying, is closing?
There's no Jews.
There's nobody there and everything else. I mean, I agree with you. If somebody really is going to think you're buying treif meat or is going to think something funny is going on, they're going to notice the meat that you're taking, the package, and see that it's meat and see that there's no hechsher on it, and check the price. And I think that's very unlikely, frankly. That people, if that could happen and something could happen from it, then you should be concerned about it. But as far as buying it is concerned, the guy who's selling it doesn't care whether it gets put out. Anyway.
Yeah.
So the Mishnah in Chagiga mentions the tumtum and androgenus, and modern day, gender theorists or whatever, they have theories of multiple genders, and they bring like intersex people or androgynous as like a proof that there's like another kind of gender. What could we say against that?
Oh man, is it really only 9 o'clock? Did my watch okay? It's only 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
I'm losing sense of time. The question is, with the gender fluidity, whether tumtum and androgenus are support for the idea of gender fluidity. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I will make a philosophical remark about that position in a moment. But a tumtum is someone whose genitalia are not visible, and the assumption is that the person has either male genitalia or female genitalia, and because the skin covers it up so you can't tell, the person, we don't know what sex he is. And therefore we have to treat him as a suffix and deal with legal issues on the grounds of our ignorance to know what his sex is. Androgenus is what's called a hermaphrodite. This is well known. Many species of animals have such conditions where it has both male and female genitalia. Right? That definitely is different from a normal male and different from a normal female. And the question of how to classify such a creature legally is a difficult question. But even if you thought that this was, and of course the vocabulary here is sinfully fluid, even if you thought that it was be another gender, but the rule that your gender is determined by your sex, your physical sex, is ironclad. If you have physical male organs, you're a male. If you have physical female organs, you're a female. And this one has a different set of physical organs. So those physical organs determine a different gender. But none of this, I am what I think I am, what I feel myself to be, and the mixtures and so on that you make up, it's all physical. It's all determined physically. It's just that this is a unique physical condition. That's not what they do. Now, I think that there is I didn't think of this myself, but I can't remember the guy's name. He's a lecturer for Young Americans for Freedom, Young American Foundation. What can it mean, according to them, to say, I identify as a woman? What does it mean? When this person uses WOMAN as a word, what does it mean? Now, I'll give you just a tiny bit of background. I saw Ben Shapiro arguing with one of these people, a young woman, what we would call a young woman, and he said to her, "Why aren't you 60?" She said, "What? Why aren't you 60? She's like, because I'm not 60. Well, why can't you identify as 60? Even though you're 23, can't you identify as 60? Have you heard of the furries? Furries are people who identify as animals. And they have conventions, with orgies and so on and so on. And they put on little horns and so on, to identify as animals. Should they pay taxes? I'm a giraffe. Giraffes don't pay taxes. So why not? Or I'm a tree. Or can you identify with just anything that you like? Okay. Now, if you agree, you're 23. If you agree that you can't identify as 60, why not? Because 60 has a definition. It has a factual definition, and you don't fit the fact. You just aren't. You can't identify with something that you just aren't. Okay, so why does it work with WOMAN? Because WOMAN has no fact. It has no content. It has no description. It has no definition. That's why you feel free to say it, because it has no content that contradicts you. Now, what's the difference between a man who likes to wear dresses and a transgender woman? What exactly is the difference? He likes to wear dresses. It was called cross-dressing once upon a time. Right? He likes to wear dresses. You ask him, what you are? He says, I'm a man. But I, as a man, have to like dress. One of the problems here is falsely stereotyping both men and women. You're only really a man if you fit this very narrow description. You're only really a woman if you fit this very narrow description. So if I don't fit the narrow description, what am I? I'm lost. Then there could be a problem. But if you have a little more flexibility, I'm a man and I don't like football. I'm a man and I like sewing. I like soft music. I'm a different kind of man. Right? But if you tell me that you are a woman or identify as a woman, I want to know what you mean. If you say that I feel attracted by what are normally classified as feminine traits, but a man could say that, and not deny that he's a man. The words man and woman are either anchored in the physical reality or they have no meaning at all. That being the case, it's just it encourages irresponsibility, and then you have these trans women who compete in women's sports and are destroying women's athletics.
They had this case with the South African sprinter Semenya that is an Aphrodite, and they were concerned that she shouldn't because she has testosterone levels.
Oh, so this was the solution, which I think is very clever, for real women, right? Biological women. They do test their testosterone levels because they're afraid they're taking testosterone to give them better performance, right? Mm-hmm. Make the trans woman have the same low testosterone levels as you have for the women. And see then I don't know. I don't know if it's possible for a man. A man's body produces 20 times as much testosterone as a woman's body naturally. What are you going to do? Give him strong hormones to suppress his testosterone levels? I don't know. But that would be the first thing to do, for sure. If it's artificially stimulating for a woman to give her more strength, and a man has 20 times as much, he certainly shouldn't be allowed to compete together. Anyway, the crucial thing here philosophically is that the concept has no definition. The very fact that you can't contradict them is precisely because it has no content. And there are a lot of things like that. Anyway, yeah. On to the next.
That's a question regarding. I've had this discussion a few times, whether it's like two rungs. Which one is worse than the other? It's like, is it better to be ignorant, or to not better, but like which is worse, to be reformed or to be an ignorant, non-practicing Jew? Person that practices reform way of Judaism. Or to not practice Judaism at all instead of, they're both wrong, but like...
I think the question you would have to ask is, which one has a better chance of improving? Yeah. Our experience in Kiruv, I think, is anyone who has a Jewish identification, who applies JEW to himself and thinks that it's important to apply JEW to himself, has a much better chance of finding his way back than someone who doesn't. At a certain point in life, he's going to ask himself, why do I think this is important? What am I willing to give up for it? What about intermarriage? It's going to raise questions in his mind. And that could lead him to do an exploration. Whereas if he's a non-practicing ignorant Jew, and JEW never comes up. They're post-religion. Like this went back to my college days, and I asked a person about what his religion. He says, well, my parents are Jewish. Meaning, I'm nothing. But my parents are Jewish. So, ask me, there's no answer to that. Right? That's much worse. Because there's nothing there to start the discussion with. So, in terms of his promise for the future, the person who's an identified Reformed Jew is in a better position than a person who has no identification at all.
So, a secular Jew that does have that identification, there are some that don't practice Judaism, but they identify as Jewish. This is a very common in South Africa. We have a lot of, we have Orthodox shuls, but there are a lot of people that drive to these Orthodox shuls. So they're not really Orthodox, but they affiliate with Orthodox, what it stands for. Like,
Okay, but that's the third category. It's it's neither of the categories you started with.
yeah, so the category I was comparing is a secular identified Jew or a reform an observant Reform Jew.
Okay, but I wouldn't call a person who drives to the Orthodox synagogue secular. Unless you mean that. But in order to be identified, he's got to do something. If he doesn't do anything Jewish, he's not identified. Right?
What would you say is then like?
So if you have this person who's secular, but he thinks of the synagogue as a kind of club, a kind of Jewish club, right? So that is an identification. Listen, when I first went down to South Africa 41 years ago, they told me about a Talmud study group. They met once a week. And these were people who were refugees from Lithuania and who knew how to learn, and they enjoyed Talmud. And they got together once a week from all over the city, Johannesburg, to learn Talmud together. From all over the city, Saturday afternoon. And they didn't walk. They got together to learn Talmud on Saturday afternoon,
Yeah.
With cigarettes in their hand.
What?
With cigarettes in there.
Probably with cigarettes and beer and jokes and all the rest. But still. So now, are these identified Jews? For sure. They didn't come together to play ping pong. They came together to learn Talmud. Are they secular? Yeah, you could call them secular. I don't mind. That's fine. But when they do something like that, if a rabbi came to town and had something to say, they might come and hear it. Whereas what we in America call a secular Jew, they would never come. Rabbi shmabbai. I'm either playing baseball or I'm working on making my next $1 million, or I have no time to waste for that. If there is something there that's a Jewish identity, then there's some hope that you can, in some circumstances, create some interest and get him to re-examine. If there's no Jewish identity at all, being Jewish is no consciousness for him, then it's very, very difficult to get the person to be interested. Yeah.
So what should we make of the situation with Russia and Ukraine? Ukraine has like a history of anti-Semitism, but I think they got better or something, and Putin is kind of pro-Jews or whatever. It's tricky to see what really his position is, but in general, and also is this like possibly a lead up to like Gog and Magog or Mashiach?
Okay, Russia and Ukraine. First of all, only the greatest tzaddikim and chachamim of the generation would be able to read the circumstances. Is this a lead up to Gog and Magog? My goodness gracious. If anybody was convinced of that, it was the Second World War. That didn't happen. The founding state of Israel, and it hasn't happened yet. It doesn't seem to be going in that direction. I mean, I don't think it's up to us to read the circumstances. And you're right, both countries have long outstanding records of anti-Semitism, and therefore we shouldn't identify with either country. And Putin is a vicious thug who is not very well balanced, and he may have made a terrible mistake in Ukraine. Some people think he's bit off more than he can chew. And people, the lefties in America are worried about Trump. He's an amateur liar compared to Putin. Putin can make up Martians. So he's unbelievable. The Ukrainians are committing genocide. Did you know that? The Ukrainians, they're all Nazis. Including Zelensky, who's a Nazi Jew.
Nazification.
Yeah, I mean, he makes up these stories. Anyway, so part of me feels you're too young to remember the Iran-Iraq war, but there was they used poison gas against each other. They were, really, and the attitude here in Israel was, we wish them both success. They should slaughter each other. Neither of them are friends of ours. Putin is friendly to Jews because when he was a child, his family was starving, and they were saved by Jews who gave them food. That's why he's friendly to Jews. And I guess, to his credit in some respect, he remembers that and he feels an indebtedness, and he, but as a political leader, he's a vicious, brutal thug who has murdered who knows how many people, and he runs his country with an iron fist. And the Ukrainians have turned to democracy and turned to more Western values, and they do have a democratic system that's much more friendly to us. And obviously, whatever anti-Semitism survives there, to have elected a Jew as the head of state means that it can't be very strong. Otherwise, he couldn't have won that many votes. So, in those terms, I would say we have slightly more sympathy for the Ukrainians. If you believe in democracy and fairness, you certainly should have the Ukrainians. They're just being slaughtered because he wants control, he wants a greater empire, and so forth and so on. So I think that, but it's just not our battle. It's not our battle. It's not our, not what we should be concerned about and think about, unless we can draw lessons from it. The one lesson that everybody is drawing is Israel has to be prepared to operate on its own. Nobody's saving Ukraine. They're helping by providing them with materials. Nobody's coming in to save Ukraine. Now, I don't know whether you can condemn that or not, because they don't have to, because they don't have treaties with Ukraine. The only one who has a treaty with us, is America. I don't even know whether we have an official mutual defense treaty. I don't even know about that. So you can't count on anybody to help you. Now, if you think that you are at Gottleib, if you think that you're doing it also, that's also a bad mistake. To realize that to represent what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants in the world, and then that gives you the schus to daven that he should help you, help preserve you. But other than that, they're at each other's throats. Yeah. So nothing. I'm not saying anything profound.
So then, I was reading the person that responds to mainly Shmei Rabba, that all his affairs, like this Meicheld, or the decrees are like written up. They torn up the harsh decrees against them just through saying Shmei Rabba, and it seems like it's a very, it's rather simple, just to say it takes 2 seconds, Shmei Rabba. How can I still can't, and there's so many times in davening, you go to a Hasidic minyan, you're saying it 7 times, one after another, like every time you're saying it, you just, how does this work in the...
So there are several things to say here. First of all, when you hear these things, every general rule has exceptions. And when it says that A causes B, it can mean that A influences B, or A is a partial cause of B. For example, the Chazal say, why did Dinah get raped? She got raped because Jacob put her in a box. When he came to meet Esau, he hid her from Esau, who might have said, we're going to make peace as brothers. Let's cement it with a marriage. She's my niece. I'll marry Dinah. Right? So now the intelligent reader says, that's why she got raped? What about Vatetse Dinah? Liros Benotos Haaretz. She went out to inspect the girls of the land. Doesn't that count? So the explanation is, sure it counts, and sure she's guilty for that. But Jacob's merit should have saved her. And Jacob sacrificed his merit when he put Dinah in a box. Which means that really, he didn't cause her to be raped, but he could have stopped it. And it says that's why. That's why it happened. Well, it's why in a certain sense. Why didn't his merit stop it? Because he sacrificed his merit in that respect. So you have to be careful. Be careful with these things. Now you say Shmei Rabba, and your sins are all forgiven. But first of all, if I remember correctly, it says with all your strength. It doesn't just say to say it.
Yeah, but
with all your strength. So now the question is, does it mean every time? Every time. That might be more realistic. Never distracted. Never tired. Never out of strength. Never preoccupied. Never. It's like saying, you say Ashrei 3 times a day. You're Ben Olam Haba. Every day. There are a lot of days in a lifetime. A lot of things happen in a lifetime. Right? The person never forgets. He's on a very special station. He's on a very special dimension that he would never forget to do that. And here that he would say it with all his strength every time he says it. That can't be the only thing he's doing. Not just saying it that way. That has to come from a much richer inner spiritual life. So then these become symptoms of that richer inner spiritual life. And it isn't just the performance of saying the words that gets you into Olam Haba.
Do you think they said this to encourage people saying it? It's not really like, how could you just derive that saying Hey Shmei Rabba has such a schar like that it can rip up a, to say Teshuvah, Torah, Tfillah?
Well, I assume they think you know what the words mean.
Yeah.
And you understand the context. The context there is about the coming of the Mashiach. Skali Kaddish is a quote from Yecheskel about the coming of the Mashiach. Right? Yesh Mei Rabba Avorach is what will happen when the Mashiach comes. So by saying these words, you're identifying with the hopes for the Mashiach, the Umalach al Hashem, and all the rest. Right? You're not just saying mysterious Aramaic sounds, which you don't understand. No, that's not the point. You're saying the words, and B'kol Kocho means with all of his intention, all of his focus, and all of his belief, his meaning, his commitment. Right? That's, I think, what's going on there. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.